Today is the most beautiful and the most painful day of my life. The sun is shining brightly outside, and there are no clouds in the sky. It looks like the heavens are celebrating, birds sing in the trees. Guests laugh in fancy groups, and champagne flutes make sounds like wind chimes in the summer breeze. Everything is just right, everything is great, but everything is falling apart inside me. I stand in front of the golden gates of a mansion that I wouldn't even know if I saw it in my dreams. This isn't just a wedding, there are marble columns, red velvet ropes, and valets in sharp uniforms. It's a show, a statement about your wealth, legacy and place in the world, and I am not any of those things. I'm just an old man in a suit that looks like it's been through a lot. They didn't yell at me, they didn't push me away or curse at me. No, that would have been simpler. What they did was worse. They grinned, kind, professional, not attached. "Sorry, sir," the doorman said, not even looking at me. "You're not on the guest list." Not on the list. As if love needed an invitation. As if a dad had to ask permission to see his own son's wedding. I wanted to shout, to grab him by the collar and shake the truth into his bones. That man inside. The groom is my blood, my body, my heart is outside of my body. But I didn't. I just nodded. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Turned away. What good would it do? They've already made up their minds about me. Someone I don't know. An error. A ghost from a time they would rather forget. And maybe, just maybe, they're right. I look at my hands. Their hands are shaking, not from age, though time has definitely left its mark on my skin. It's something deeper, because of the weight of 25 years of silence. Of watching from the dark, of loving from so far away that it feels like a different life. My shoes are dirty, my tie is a little off, even though my coat is clean. It's been repaired so many times that it's mostly thread. I saved for months to get this suit. Not because I care about how things look, but because today is important. Because he is important, my kid, my only child, the boy I held in my arms when his mother died. The boy I promised to keep safe with every breath I had left. And now they won't even let me go in and hear him say I do. I move back from the gate. The laughter from inside sounds like music from another world. I gave up a world so he could live in it. I shut my eyes, and I do remember. I remember how it rained the night he was born. The sky was crying, and the cold, steady rain drummed against the windows of the hospital. I can still smell the antiseptic, sweat, and fear, and I can still feel my wife's hand in mine. Weak but determined, with tired, loving eyes, she whispered, "His name will be Daniel." She smiled after that, a smile that is real, the kind that makes a room glow. And then she was gone, just like that. She died so he could live. And at that moment, I promised not only to her but also to the little, crying bundle they put in my arms. I whispered into his wet hair, "I'll never let you go. I will help you through every storm. I will be your home, your shelter, and your light." And for 7 years, I worked 2 shifts at the factory and came home smelling like oil and tired. But I always had a story for him. I kissed his fevered forehead, patched up his scraped knees, and stayed up all night when nightmares kept him up. I showed him how to ride a bike, tie his shoes, and say please and thank you even when no one was watching. He called me dad, not dad, papa, soft, full of faith. I would have died for that word, and in a way, I almost did. The doctors told me I had a rare disease when he was 7. Something in my blood, something that didn't get better with treatment. They said, 5 years, maybe less. Get your business in order. I didn't cry, not at that time, because I had to take care of my son. That made me sell everything, the small house with blue shutters, the old pickup truck that didn't work very well, my late wife's wedding ring, which almost broke me. I spent every last penny on experimental treatments, on doctors in cities I'd never heard of, and on hope that cost me more than I could afford. But not for me, for him, because if I died, who would put him to bed at night? Who would tell him he was brave when he was scared? Who would tell him every day that he was loved? That's when they showed up. His aunt and uncle, who are my wife's sister and brother-in-law. Rich, shiny, people who had names that made things easier for them in life. They could see how desperate I was. "I'm so tired. My coat is getting old." They made me an offer. "Let us raise him," they said softly. "You're sick. You can't give him the life he needs, but we can. We'll give him schools, chances, and a stable life, a future." I wanted to say no. God, how I wanted to say no. But when I looked at Daniel, who was sleeping soundly in the next room with his chest rising and falling like a calm tide, I knew this wasn't about what I wanted. It was about what he needed. So I put my name on the papers, and then I did the hardest thing a dad can do. I left, not just in a physical way, in an emotional way. Totally, I said to them, tell him we're both gone, tell him that his parents died when he was too young to remember. Let him grow up without having to deal with the pain of knowing his father left him. It wasn't true, but it was a lie that was full of love. I watched from a distance for 25 years. I saw pictures of him graduating in the newspaper. I pretended to read a book while he said his lines on stage at the edge of the school plays. I watched his career, his friends, and his first heartbreak, but I was always invisible. Never said a word. I never got in touch, never called, never wrote, because I kept my word, until now, because today is his wedding day. And I couldn't help but go, not when he's at the altar, ready to start the next chapter of his life without ever knowing the truth about where he came from. I didn't come here to cause trouble, not to ask for, not to make someone feel bad. I came here just to make him happy. To see him smile like he did when he was 5, missing a front tooth, and holding up a picture he had made just for me. To see him promise his bride forever and take her hand. I didn't need to be recognized. I didn't need to be at the table. Hold on a second. There was one quiet moment in the back where I could whisper to the sky. He made it. He's fine. My son is fine. But they wouldn't even give me that. They slammed the door in my face. I heard it as I turned to leave. My shoulders hunched from the weight of rejection, the music getting louder. The happy cheers and the linking of glasses. A party. And I was its spirit. But here's what they don't know. I am not just an old man who got lost on the wrong property. I'm not a stranger. I am the reason he is still alive. He talks kindly, stands tall, and loves with all his heart because of me. Even if he doesn't feel me there, I am the ground beneath his feet. And when the truth comes out, and it will, when they find out who I really am, when my son looks into my eyes and finally sees me, there won't be any music or laughter in the silence that falls over this perfect wedding. It will be heavy, thick, choking, because the biggest surprise isn't that I came. It's that they tried to get rid of me in the first place. And today, I'm coming back today, not like a beggar, not like a ghost, but like his father, and no guest list can keep that truth from getting out. I had 2 lives in my hands 32 years ago. One was getting away. The other one had just started. Elena, my wife, was in that hospital bed. She was pale as the moon and her breathing was shallow but steady. She had been in labor for 36 hours. The doctors said things like emergency and complications in low voices. But she never freaked out, never once, even though the pain was making her face twist. She kept her eyes on me, calm and trusting, as if I could stop the tide with my bare hands. And then, with one last push that seemed to break the world in half, Daniel was born. He cried right away, a loud, angry wail that filled the room like a declaration. The nurses smiled. The doctor let out a sigh of relief. But I couldn't stand to look at him, not yet, because Elena was getting weaker. As they cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blue blanket, I held her hand. Her grip was strong, even though her fingers were cold. She slowly turned her head and looked at our son for the first and last time. He looks great, she said softly. After that, she looked at me. Her eyes, which were already dimming, held mine with a love that made me feel like I was drowning and being saved at the same time. Promise me, she said, her voice barely audible over Daniel's cries. Promise me you'll look after him, with all that you are, with everything you own. I gave her a kiss on the forehead. I promise, she grinned, a smile that is real, the kind that makes a room bright even when it's dark. And then she was gone, just like that. No last words that are dramatic. No last confession, nothing but silence. And in that silence, a new life began and a promise was made. I kept my word. Every day, I worked 3 jobs. During the day I cleaned the school. At night I washed dishes at the diner, and on the weekends I worked at the auto shop. If I was lucky, I got 4 hours of sleep a night. My hands hurt all the time, my back hurt all the time, and my eyes were always heavy. But what about Daniel? Daniel never knew we didn't have much money. I made sure it was true. I sewed his clothes together with thread that didn't match and told him it was fashionable. I made castles out of cardboard boxes and swords out of spoons. I read him stories every night, even when I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I wanted him to know that imagination was free but worth everything. And every night, before he went to sleep, I would kiss his forehead and say, Daniel, you are loved, more than the stars, the oceans, and time. He trusted me, and I believed it too. We were all we needed for 7 years. Just the 2 of us against the whole world. Then the world came knocking. It all began with tiredness, a cough that wouldn't stop. Then there were the brook eyes, dark, unexplained and growing on my arms like storm clouds. I didn't pay attention to it. Pushed through, until one morning when I fell in the kitchen while making him breakfast. The doctors said it was aplasty anemia, a rare problem with the bone marrow. They said, your body isn't making enough blood cells. You might have 5 years without treatment. 5 years. Daniel was 7 years old. He needed me for another 18 years. At the very least, I sold it all. The little blue house with the crooked porch where he took his first steps. The old truck that made a loud noise like a cannon every time I started it. The watch that my dad gave me, Elena's ring for her wedding. When I gave that ring to her, I cried, not because it was valuable, but because it was the last thing I had of her. But I did it, without a doubt, because Daniel was more than just memories. I flew to clinics in Mexico, Canada, and even Germany where they promised me a chance. No matter how small, I had to get transfusions, experimental drugs, and needles in every vein. I lost some weight, my hair got thinner. My hands were always shaking, but I never missed a story before bed. Not ever. Even on the worst days, I would sit by his bed and tell him stories about brave knights and talking wolves. About stars that fell to earth and became children like him. He never knew I was going to die. And that was on purpose. Because I couldn't stand seeing fear in his eyes when he looked at me. I wanted him to think of me as strong, as of now, as is. But then they came. Clara, Elena's sister, and Richard, her husband. They had always been distant, polite at holidays, and kind with gifts but not with love. But when they found out I had cancer, they came to our apartment without telling us. Clara hugged me tightly and said, we can't let Daniel go through this alone. Richard, always the realist, said it straight out, James, you're not going to make it. And who will take care of him when you're not there? Services for people? Foster homes? Is that what you want for your boy? I didn't say anything. The truth was that I didn't know. I sat by Daniel's bed for hours that night, watching him sleep after they left. His chest rose and fell in a calm way. He held onto his stuffed bear with one hand. I had sewn it back together after the dog chewed off its ear. I thought about what would happen next, about how he grew up in a system that didn't know his favorite color was green, that he hated peas but loved broccoli, or that he needed a rocket ship-shaped nightlight to fall asleep. And I was aware, I couldn't let that happen. I made the call. Then, we met at a lawyer's office a week later. The papers were signed. We came to an agreement on the terms. Daniel would be adopted by Clara and Richard. In a legal way, totally. And I would go away, not because I wanted to. But I couldn't stay because I loved him too much. I made one demand: tell him we both died. Let him know that his parents are no longer with him. Don't let him think about why his dad left. Don't let him feel that pain. Clara agreed, and her eyes filled with tears. He'll have it all. James, a good school, music lessons, vacations, a real life ahead. I nodded, but I couldn't say what I really thought: that I didn't care about the future. I cared about his heart, and I would have broken mine to keep it safe. He didn't understand the day he left. He held onto my leg and cried, "Don't go, Papa, please." I knelt down, held his face in my rough, tired hands, and looked into his eyes. I whispered, "Be brave, my love, be nice, and always remember that you are very loved." Then I let go, and I left. I kept my word for 25 years. I never got in touch with him. I never sent a letter. He never went to his school, his games, or his graduations. Instead, he watched like a ghost who wouldn't cross over, hiding behind trees or parked cars. I was quiet, in giving up, in love that was so quiet it didn't make a sound. But today, he is getting married today, and I can't let him say I do without knowing the truth. Not because I want to get credit, but he needs to know where he came from. He should know that his strength, kindness, and ability to love did not come from being rich or having a lot of power. It came from a promise made in a hospital room, from a dad who gave up everything so that his son could have everything. And if that truth breaks the perfect picture they have of him, that's how it is, because some quiet times are louder than screams. And a few promises must be kept, even if it takes a lifetime to do so. I stood in front of the broken mirror in the men's room of a gas station 3 blocks from the estate. The kind of place where the lights flicker, the smell of bleach and motor oil lingers, and there is only one paper towel dispenser that never works. I fixed my tie again, made the lapels of my jacket smooth. I ran my hand over my thinning white hair. I looked like I was getting old. Not just old, but also used. Its pages were warped, its spine was broken, and its words were still there, but they were harder to read. My eyes are the worst part, sunken, in the dark, the color of storm clouds over a sea that no one remembers. But deep down, under the tiredness and the years of silence, there is something that hasn't changed. It looks the same as it did when Daniel was born. The same look I had on when I taught him how to ride a bike, held him after his first heartbreak, and whispered stories into the dark just to hear him sigh in his sleep. It's love, be quiet, unbreakable, not seen. I leaned closer to the mirror, as if being close could bring back the man I used to be, one with strong shoulders, steady hands, and a voice that didn't break when he spoke. That man is no longer here. There's a ghost left, standing on the edge of a life he gave up so his son could live it fully. But I'm still his father. Blood doesn't care about who is on the guest list. Love doesn't need an invitation, and a promise made with tears doesn't go away with time. I thought about going back, going away, letting the wedding happen without me, just like I've let every other big event go by without saying anything. But then I remembered what Daniel said when he was 5. We were lying on the grass in our little backyard, looking up at the clouds as they moved across the sky. "Papa, do you think monsters are real?" he asked, pointing to one that looked like a dragon. I said, "The only real monsters are the ones we let win by not saying anything." He had wide eyes and asked, "So we have to be brave?" I said yes, even when it hurts. And today is the most courageous thing I'll ever do, not because I'm facing them, but I'm choosing truth over comfort, love instead of silence. Being there is better than not being there. I moved away from the mirror, took a deep breath. The man who was looking at me wasn't a beggar. Not a stranger, not a mistake. He was a father who loved so much that he disappeared so his son could shine. And now, he's coming back, not to get back, not to ask for, but to see, to say just by being there. I never left. I was always here. I was there for you every time you made a good choice, said something nice, or chose love over fear. That was us. I left the bathroom and stepped into the afternoon sun. The air smelled like roses and cut grass from far away. A violin started to play somewhere in the estate. The ceremony was about to begin. My heart beat so hard against my ribs that it felt like a bird was trapped. I didn't have a plan, no big speech, no big reveal. This is all I would do: stand at the edge of the garden. I would see him say I do. I would let the sight of him being happy fill the empty spaces in my heart. Then I would go, in a quiet way, like I always do. But it looks like fate had other plans. I saw her again as I turned the corner onto the side path, staying in the shadows and out of sight. The bride, she was standing alone near the rose arbor with her hands tightly clasped in front of her. She seemed nervous, lovely, man, and then she changed. It was like she had been waiting for my eyes to meet hers. She didn't shout, not a wave. They held my gaze for a long time, then nodded very slightly, almost not at all, but it meant a lot. Come, I thought about it. This wasn't in the script. People weren't supposed to see me. Not really, but there was something in her eyes that made me think of Elena. Not just the shape or the color, but the knowing, the quiet knowledge that some wounds go deeper than skin and some silences say more than words. I moved forward, then one more. The gravel path made a soft crunching sound when I walked on it. The music grew louder. It was a slow, painful version of Canon in D. The guests took their seats. The groom stood tall and still at the altar, fiddling with his cufflinks in that nervous way that he has had since he was a boy. He hadn't seen me yet, and I wasn't sure I wanted him to. But then he turned, just a little bit, like they knew something. We looked at each other across the garden. The clock stopped. For a moment I could see that he was confused, then interest. Then, something else happened, a flash, a memory that was so deep it barely moved. But it did. He frowned, went forward half a step, and at that moment, I understood. He didn't know I was his dad, but his soul remembered mine. I didn't say anything, did not move. He just stood there, an old man in a used suit, holding nothing but the weight of 25 years of love. And then, softly, almost to myself, I whispered the words that have been in my heart every day since I let him go on here. Daniel. The wind blew my voice away, but I like to think he heard it deep down inside him, because love doesn't need to be heard. It just needs a heart that is willing to listen. And now, maybe today is the day he will finally do it. They told me I wasn't on the list. Only 3 words. Simple, clinical, done. But those words meant a lot to him for the rest of his life. What is a guest list anyway? It's more than just names on paper. It's a statement of who is important, who is a part of it, who is worth celebrating being there, and whose absence goes unnoticed, or worse, is preferred. I stood outside the gilded gates of my son's wedding, and those words sank into my bones like winter frost. I wasn't just not invited. I wasn't wanted, and the worst part, I got it. Clara and Richard, who raised Daniel, made his life clean, safe, and polished. They gave him private schools, summer homes, and connections that opened doors for him before he even knocked. They told him a story: your parents died when you were young. We loved you, but you left too soon. We are here for you now. It was a clear story, a safe one. And what about me? I was the loose end. The truth is messy, the ghost from a past they had carefully buried. So I wasn't on the list, of course. Why would they ask the man who could ruin everything with just one look? I turned away from the gate, and the gravel driveway made my shoes scuff. The sun was high and warm on my back, but I felt cold inside. Not because I was turned down, thought that hurt, but because it was so ridiculous. How can the person who gave you life, held you when you cried, and sang you your first lullaby become a stranger in your own story? I walked slowly around the edge of the estate, staying in the shade of the trees. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to make him feel bad. All I wanted was to see him at the altar in his wedding suit, with hope in his eyes and love on his lips. That was all I wanted. My only prayer. Still, that seemed like too much. I saw a bench under a magnolia tree with white flowers that smelled really good. I sat down. I shut my eyes, heard the distant sound of a party, the linking of glasses, the murmur of voices, and the soft rise and fall of string music. It should have been happy, but to me it sounded like a door shutting. Then there were footsteps, light, on purpose. I opened my eyes. It was her, the bride. She came closer slowly, as if she was afraid I would disappear if she moved too quickly. The sunlight made her dress shine, but it was her eyes that kept me there. They were steady, searching, and full of kindness that I didn't expect. You are still here, she said in a soft voice. I couldn't leave. I said. She sat next to me on the bench, making sure her dress didn't get wrinkled. We sat in silence for a long time, just watching the garden on the other side of the hedge. Finally, she said, Daniel's been distracted all morning. He keeps looking at the door. It looks like he's waiting for someone. I couldn't breathe. He doesn't even know I'm here. Then she turned to me and really looked at me, but maybe part of him does. I didn't say anything, because I didn't believe what I heard. She took a single flower out of the small bouquet she was carrying. It wasn't the main one, it was a simpler bunch of white roses and eucalyptus. She gave it to me, for bravery, she said. I took it. The petals were soft and cool against my rough fingers. Why are you helping me? I asked. She smiled, but it was a sad smile. Because I lost my dad when I was 12. I'd do anything to see him walk through a door again, even if it broke my heart. Her words hit me like a wave. I looked at the rose and then back at her. You don't even know who I am. She said. I know enough. You're in love with him, and that's all that counts today. She stood up, smoothed out her dress, and held out her hand. Come with me. I thought about it. They'll stop me. No, not if I'm with you. And just like that, what seemed impossible seemed possible. She took me through a side gate that was unlocked and not seen. And then she took me down a quiet path that went through the garden. We walked past groups of guests drinking champagne, laughing, and taking pictures. People didn't pay much attention to us. To them, I was just an old person who was a guest and maybe a distant relative walking with the bride before the wedding. But my heart raced like a drum, because I was going over a line that I had been told I would never cross again. We stopped behind a tall hedge of boxwood near the back of the seated guests. I could see everything from here. The altar, the blooms, the groom. My boy. He stood tall with his hands clasped in front of him, looking every bit like the man he had become, confident, calm, and full of quiet joy. But then he turned a little and looked around the crowd. I saw the same restless searching in him that I'd seen when he was a kid and couldn't find his favorite toy. He was searching for something, or something. Wait here, the bride said in a low voice. She walked over to him and touched his arm gently. He bent down, and she whispered in his ear. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw how he reacted. He quickly turned his head up. His eyes got bigger. He turned around slowly and on purpose and looked right at me. Not behind me, at me. The clock stopped. The music stopped. The guests became blurry. There were 25 years and 20 feet of grass between us. But there was something deeper than time, silence, and lies that connected us. He moved forward, then one more. The guests whispered, someone gasped. But he kept going. He walked right up to me, and he never took his eyes off mine. And then he asked the question I had been dreading and hoping to hear in a voice full of emotion. Who are you? I didn't move, didn't turn away. I said softly, I'm the man who gave you your first bath. Who sang you to sleep when you were scared of thunder? Who was with you on your first day of school? Who promised your mother on her deathbed that I would protect you with my life? He stopped breathing. I walked away so you could walk forward. He had tears in his eyes, not tears of rage, not tears of confusion, tears of understanding. His heart remembered me, even if his mind didn't. And at that moment, in the middle of his wedding day, with strangers and silence all around him, my son looked at me and finally saw his father. The list of guests didn't matter anymore, because love had just changed it. Daniel, my son, stood in front of me in a tailored black tuxedo, with his hair neatly combed and his posture straight. He looked like a man ready to start his life. But I could still see the boy I had put to bed 1,000 nights ago in his eyes. The same lack of certainty, the same quiet desire for something he couldn't name. Who are you? He asked again, his voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might break the fragile moment we were having. I didn't answer right away, not because I didn't know what to say, but because the weight of those words, after 25 years of silence, was too much for me to bear alone. I looked at him. Looked really hard. His jawline showed me the curve of his mother's cheek. The way he set his brow, mine. He bit his lower lip when he was nervous, just like he did when he was 5 and had to read a poem to his class. For years, I watched him from a distance, collecting bits and pieces of his life like precious stones. His graduation photo in the local paper, a glimpse of him getting on a train, and the sound of his laugh coming from a cafe patio. But now that we were face to face, I could see the whole picture. Not just the man he was, but also the child he was and the father I had tried so hard to be. Finally, I said, I'm the man who saved your life. The words hung in the air like smoke. The garden around us became quiet. The string quartet stopped making music. Guests turned in their seats, feeling something change in the air, something heavy, old, and impossible to ignore. It seemed like even the birds were holding their breath. Daniel stayed still, did not blink. He just looked at me, his chest rising and falling quickly like he was trying to run away from the truth. You are lying, he said, but he didn't sound sure of himself. Just fear. I have no reason to lie, I said softly. Not today, not here. He looked back and saw Clara, his aunt, standing still near the altar with a pale face. Richard was holding onto the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping him up. His bride, who was crying and watching us but didn't say anything. She was aware. She knew she couldn't control this moment. We owned it. To the past, to the promise. Daniel turned around and looked at me. If you really are my father, why didn't you ever come back? Why did you let me think you were dead? He cracked his voice on the last word. And it broke something inside me, because that was the question I was most afraid of. Not mad, not an accusation, but pain, the kind that stays in your bones and whispers in the dark. Was I not worth staying for? I took a deep breath. I didn't let you think I was dead, Daniel. I got you to believe it. And I did it because I loved you more than I loved myself. He shook his head. That doesn't make sense, doesn't it? I asked in a soft voice. Think about being 7 years old. Your world is small, your room, your toys, and your dad's voice at night. Then one day, people you don't know tell you he's gone. You weep, you yell. You ask him to come back, but he never does. I stopped for a moment, and my own voice got thicker. Now picture this, he does come back. Years later, at the entrance to your school, waiting outside your home, saying your name. What would you do? Daniel had a hard time swallowing. I'd like to go with him. Exactly, I said. That's why I stayed away. You would have torn yourself in two trying to choose between the life they gave you and the ghost of the one you lost if I had come. And I couldn't do that to you. I couldn't be the reason you had a hole in your heart. He was crying now, not a word, can't be stopped. But I did live with a hole, he said softly, every day. I had no idea what it was, but I always felt like something was missing. My eyes hurt. I know, because I felt it too. We stood there, father and son, separated by decades but united by a sadness we had both kept to ourselves. The people at the wedding were shocked and silent. Everyone stayed still. Nobody said anything. It was like the whole world had stopped to see a truth that had been hidden for a long time finally come to light. Daniel then slowly reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, Old picture. I couldn't breathe. The picture I had of him at 6. Holding the fishing rod and smiling in the summer sun was the same one. He said, I found this in Clara's desk when I was 16. His voice shaking, she said it was a mistake, that it was owned by someone else. But I held on to it, because I felt safe when I looked at it. I felt at home. I reached out and touched the edge of the picture. Even though my hand was shaking, our fingers touched for a second. But it felt like lightning. That's the day you caught your first fish. I said, my voice breaking. You were so proud that you walked around the yard with it for an hour, showing it to the neighbor's cat. He let out a small, what laugh, I remember that. And just like that the dam burst. He didn't hug me, didn't break down in tears, but he moved closer, so close that I could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes, smell the faint cedar scent of his cologne, and feel the warmth of his presence after a lifetime of being far away. Tell me everything, he said, and that's what I did. In the middle of his wedding day, with strangers and silence all around me, I started to talk. Not like a stranger, not like a ghost, but as his dad. And for the first time in 25 years, people heard me. I didn't talk loudly. I didn't have to. The garden had gotten so quiet that you could hear the petals moving in the wind. Everyone who was there, friends, family, and guests, was frozen in place, caught between shock and respect. As if they were seeing something holy, Daniel stood in front of me, his eyes wide and his hands shaking around the edges of that old picture. It was the only thing that connected two lives that love had torn apart. Tell me everything, he said, so I started, not with rage, not with blame, but with the truth, which is raw, unvarnished, and heavy with the weight of years. I said, I met your mother in the spring of 1987. In a low but steady voice, she was painting a mural on the outside of the community center. I was fixing a hole in the roof. She looked up, saw that I was covered in dust and sweat, and laughed. Not at me but at how silly it all is, and I knew from that laugh. Daniel listened without moving. Elena was light. She thought that people should get second chances, that kindness should be given without conditions, and that love shouldn't keep score. She cried when she found out she was pregnant with you. But not out of fear, she was happy. She said our love made a person. How was that even possible? I stopped for a moment to swallow the lump in my throat. She never got to hold you for long, a few minutes. Long enough to say your name softly, long enough for him to look at me and say, take care of him. I promised I would. Daniel's eyes sparkled. You kept your word. I tried, I said. Just us for 7 years. We lived in a small flat above a bakery. The smell of cinnamon rolls used to make you sleepy. You called the baker Uncle Tony, and every Saturday he would give you day-old croissants in a paper bag. Daniel's lips turned up in a small smile. I remember that smell. You were brave, I said again, even when you were scared. When you had bad dreams, you would crawl into bed with me and say, Papa, tell me a story about the wolf that wasn't scary. So I made one up about a wolf who watched over lost kids and sang them to sleep by moonlight. He let out a sharp breath, as if he had just remembered something. I thought I dreamed that. No, I said softly. It was real. Just like I was. Then the hard part came, I said. I knew I wouldn't last when I got sick. The doctors were very clear. But I couldn't let you grow up in foster care. Clara and Richard gave you a place to live. Safety, stability, and I gave you to them. Daniel's face got tense. You let me go. I gave you a future, I said softly, and I made them promise one thing, to tell him that his parents are gone. Let him grieve once in a clean way and then move on. Don't let him spend his whole life wondering why his dad left. He looked down and didn't say anything for a long time. Then I thought, but I did wonder, every year on your birthday, on Father's Day, every time I saw a man playing catch with his son in the park. I know, I said softly, and I'm sorry, a lot more than you can imagine. He raised his head. Why didn't you ever get in touch? A letter? Do you want to talk on the phone? I did what I said I would do. I said, to you, to Elena, to me. You hugged my legs and said, if you're going to leave, don't come back. If you do, I'll want to go with you. And I can't. Daniel's breath stopped. He couldn't believe what he saw. Did I say that? I said you were 7. You knew more than any child should have to. And I told them I wouldn't come back. So I didn't. Tears were streaming down his face, and they were quiet and steady. All these years, I thought no one loved me. That my real dad didn't want me. No, I said with anger. You were loved so much that it hurt to breathe. I watched your soccer games from the parking lot. I stood behind a tree outside your high school graduation. I read everything that was written about your work. I knew when you got your first apartment, when you fell in love, and when you found your passion. Daniel, I was always there. Just quietly, he moved a little closer. Why today? Why now? I told them because today you're making a vow to love someone for the rest of your life, and you should do that with the whole truth. Not the story they told you, but the one that made you who you are. Your strength, kindness, and bravery didn't come from money or power. They came from a little boy who learned to be brave because his dad loved him so much that he left. He looked at me, really looked, and for the first time, I saw that he knew me not just in his eyes but also in his soul. He slowly reached out and took my hand. He had a strong grip. It's warm, for real. He said, you are not a ghost. Yes, I said, I'm your dad. And in that moment, with the white roses arching over them and the sun shining down on them, the truth that had been hidden for so long finally came out. He held my hand tightly, as if he was afraid I would disappear if he let go. And maybe I would have at one point, but not today. I was rooted today, not by pride or regret, but by the simple, unshakable fact that I was finally seen. Daniel didn't say anything for a while. He just stood there, holding my hand, and his chest rose and fell as if he were trying to catch up with all the breaths he had been holding for a lifetime. The wedding guests around us stayed still, caught between awe and confusion, as if they had walked into a scene from a story they weren't supposed to see. He then asked what happened the day I left, in a soft voice. I shut my eyes, not to forget the memory but to honor it. I said it was a Tuesday, rainy. It was a gray drizzle that soaked your bones without you even knowing it. You wore the red sneakers with Velcro straps that you insisted on wearing even to bed. You packed your own suitcase with your bear, your dinosaur book, and your rocket ship blanket. I opened my eyes and stared at him. You didn't cry when Clara came to get you, not at first. You just stood by the door, small and serious, as if you were trying to remember every detail of our apartment. Then you looked at me and asked, Papa, will you forget me? Even though my voice broke, I kept going. I knelt down. Even though my knees were already hurting from working in the factory. And I held your face in my hands. I told you, Daniel, no one could ever forget you, not even in 1,000 lives. You nodded, which made me think you believed me. Then you hugged me so tightly that I thought my ribs would break. You said in a low voice, don't come back if you're going to leave. If you do, I will want to go with you, and I can't. Daniel's breath caught. Did I really say that? I said you did. And I knew you meant it. You were just as much protecting me as I was protecting you. I kissed your forehead, fixed your collar, and walked you to the car. I didn't see it drive away. I couldn't. I went inside, sat on the floor of your empty room, and didn't move for hours. He held my hand tighter. For all these years, I thought you decided to go. I picked you, I said. Every day, even if it meant staying away. A tear fell from his eye and onto the back of my hand. It's warm, real. Then he turned to face the guests without letting go. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. He was no longer the groom. He was a son taking back his past. He said, this is my father. Not a man who says he is. Not someone from the past. My dad. Clara was standing by the altar, her face pale and her hands holding a handkerchief. Richard turned his head away and clenched his jaw. But I wasn't mad at them. Only sadness, for the years that were wasted, for the truth that was hidden, and for the love that was kept to oneself instead of shared. Daniel turned around and looked at me. Stay, he said, please. Take me down the aisle. I shook my head slowly. This is your day. Your time. I don't need to sit in the front row. I just wanted you to know I was here. But you belong here. He kept saying, you should be with me. And at that moment, I saw it. The boy who used to need me to chase monsters out from under his bed was now giving me a place to stay in his life. I nodded. Love isn't just giving up. Sometimes it's just accepting. He led me through the stunned guests, past Clara's tearful gaze and Richard's silent nod of reluctant agreement, and stopped at the front. Then, with a tenderness that broke me down, he took my arm and put it over his. Come with me, he said softly, and that's what I did. Not like a ghost, not like a stranger, but as the father who never stopped loving his son, even when everyone else said he shouldn't. Before everything changes, the world seems to hold its breath for a moment. Not because of fear, but because of respect, as if time itself knows that something holy is happening. That moment came when Daniel looked at me, not with doubt or confusion, but with a growing shaky certainty. It began in his eyes. Not the groom's eyes, which were set in a tailored suit and surrounded by champagne and orchids and the polished hopes of a life built on carefully chosen truths. No, these were the eyes of the boy who would put his ear to my chest to hear my heartbeat before going to sleep. The boy who thought monsters lived under his bed until I told him that love was stronger than fear and that courage wasn't the absence of fear. And now, in the golden light of his wedding day, that boy knew who his father was. Not because of what I call myself, not because of papers, DNA or shocking news, but because of memory, memory that goes deep into the cells in the soul. He said in a low voice, almost as if he didn't believe it. You used to hum when you fixed things, a sound with no tune, like a kettle about to boil. I nodded, shocked. I didn't think you'd remember that. I didn't know I did, he said in a low voice. Until now. He reached out slowly as if he thought I might disappear like fog. His fingers touched the back of my hand, which was rough from years of work and had spots from age. Then they closed around it, and in that touch, 25 years fell apart. The distance was gone, the quiet broke, the life fell apart. He was aware, not only with his mind, but also with his bones. He breathed, "You're him. You're really him." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My throat was too tight and my heart was too full. But I squeezed his hand back, just like I used to do when he was learning to walk and the world seemed too big for his small body. The garden stayed still around us. Guests sat still, not because they were uncomfortable, but because they were in awe. The wind even seemed to stop, as if it didn't want to disturb the delicate miracle that was happening under the flower arch. Daniel then turned to the crowd and spoke clearly and steadily, with a truth that didn't need to be proven. "This is my dad." 3 words, easy, the end. And with them he didn't just recognize me. He claimed me, without a doubt, no shame. He wasn't afraid of what it might mean for the story he'd been told his whole life. He just stood there, holding hands with the man who gave him life, and told the world. Clara, his aunt, was near the front row and was crying. Not tears of anger, but tears of sadness for the years lost. The secret kept too long and the love she tried to protect but ended up burying. Richard stood next to her, his shoulders slumped. The weight of a truth he could no longer hide finally broke his polished calm. But I didn't pay attention to them. I only looked at Daniel. I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't dared hope for: forgiveness. Not the kind that makes the past go away, but the kind that makes it better. He got closer and spoke so softly that only I could hear. "I felt you all this time. I could feel you in the quiet times. Even when I didn't know your name. When I put kindness ahead of pride. When I stood up for someone who no one else could see. When I loved without keeping track." He had a hard time swallowing. "That was you, wasn't it?" I said yes in a low voice. "That was always me." He hugged me without saying another word. Not a hug that was polite, not a formal gesture, a full, fierce, trembling hug that says, "I've been waiting for you my whole life." I held him like I did when he was 6 and skinned his knee. Like I did the night before he left. Like I've wanted to every day since. And as I held my son, my grown, smart, kind son, in my arms on the day he married the love of his life, I finally understood love never goes away. It just waits for you to remember it. And now, we thought of each other today. He kept me longer than anyone thought he would, more time than was proper. More time than a perfect wedding script would allow, and in that embrace, tight, trembling, real, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace, not the lack of pain. Not the removal of loss, but the quiet faith that love never really dies. Even when it is buried, it just waits for the right time to come back up. His eyes were wet when he finally pulled back, but his smile stayed the same. He wiped his cheek with the back of his hand, looking almost embarrassed. And then he looked at me with a tenderness that made me feel weak all over again. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he asked in a soft but urgent voice. "All these years, I could have known you." I took a deep breath. The question wasn't an accusation, it was sadness, and grief needed the truth. "I was scared," I said, "afraid that if I came you'd be torn. That you would hate your life because you thought you had missed out on something better. And I couldn't stand the thought of you feeling guilty on top of everything else." He shook his head. "You didn't give me enough credit." "Maybe not," I said, "but I gave you everything. I had a fresh start. A chance to grow up without having to wonder why your dad wasn't there. I thought that was the best thing I could give you." He was quiet for a moment, watching the sunlight shine through the leaves above us. Then he said, "But the best present would have been knowing you loved me enough to stay. Even from a distance." My chest got tight. I stayed, not in the way you could see. He said, "I know, That's what hurts the most, that you were out there, loving me in secret, while I thought no one loved me. I reached out and touched his arm. You were never unloved. Daniel, not for 1 second. I was happy every time you did well. I hurt every time you fell. I thanked God every time you laughed for letting me be a part of your story. Even if it was only in the margins. He looked down, then back up at me, and his face changed from sad to determined. Then let's change the margins. His bride stepped forward before I could say anything. She didn't say anything. She held my hand in both of hers, warm, gentle, and and pressed it between them like a holy gift. Stay, she said, be with us. Today isn't just about what's to come. It's about honoring our roots. I looked at Daniel. He nodded. Please, Papa, Papa. The word hit me like a wave. I hadn't heard it in 25 years. And now, in the middle of his wedding, he said it like he had never said it before. I had to swallow hard. Are you sure this is your day? I don't want to, he gently cut in. You're not ruining anything. You are finishing it. And just like that, the last wall between us fell down. The officiant stepped forward when he felt the change. Should we go on? Daniel turned to his bride, took her hands, and smiled. It was the same smile he had given me as a child when he had done something hard. Very proud, full of hope, full of love. Yes, he said. Let's keep going. But before the vows, he turned to me one last time. Will you stand with me? Not behind me, not to the side. With me. I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. He moved, so I stood behind him and to his left, which was the best spot, the right place for a father. As the ceremony went on, I saw him take his bride's hands and promise to love her in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want. His voice was strong, and I understood he understood what those words meant. Not because they were written down, but because he had lived them. Because he had been shaped by a love that chose sacrifice over selfishness, silence over spectacle, and presence over possession. When it was her turn to talk, his bride looked at both Daniel and me, and she said, I promise to honor your past as much as your future. To remember that love made the man I love long before I knew his name. Tears fell down my cheeks then, quiet and unstoppable, because she saw it. They both did. This wasn't just a wedding, it was a return home. When the officiant said they were husband and wife, Daniel kissed his bride under the arch of white roses. He turned right away, not to the crowd or the cameras, but to me. He held my hand again, squeezed it, and said, thanks for coming back. I never left, I said, and for the first time in 25 years. I meant it, not as a ghost or a memory but as a father finally standing in the light. The guests cheered loudly, but I could barely hear it. I could only hear my son's heart beating steadily, so close to mine. Finally, and time again, later, at the reception, he pulled me aside by the old oak tree, the same one where I had been hiding just a few hours before. He said, I want you to live with us, not in a guest room, in our house, like family. I shook my head, moved but not sure. I don't want to bother you, he said firmly. You won't be bothering me. You'll be coming home. And then I understood that saying I'm sorry isn't enough to forgive someone. It's about saying stay, and today, I was staying today. The reception went exactly as I had hoped it would. String lights twinkled above the garden, giving white linen tables, crystal glasses, and faces that were happy and, in some cases, quietly realizing something, a golden glow. But I didn't see any judgment in their eyes anymore. I saw something much stronger. Witness. It wasn't just a wedding they were watching. They were seeing a miracle, not one that involved parting seas or burning bushes, but something much more human, a father and son who had been apart for a long time finding each other again. Daniel didn't keep me a secret. He didn't put me in a corner or introduce me with doubt. He took me to the main table, not as an afterthought, not as the man who says he is my father, but as dad. He pulled out my chair himself, just like I used to do for him when he was little, and we ate at our small kitchen table. After that, he bent down and said, sit where you belong. I sat down. For the first time in 25 years, I didn't feel like I was in the way of my son. People started to toast. Friends talked about how kind, honest, and strong Daniel was. His best man made fun of their college days, and the bride's sister told a story about how Daniel had helped her through a tough time without expecting anything in return. After that, Clara stood up. She held her champagne flute with shaky hands, and her eyes were red around the edges but clear. She looked at me first, really looked, and then she looked at Daniel. I raised you like my own, she said, her voice full of feeling. I loved you with all my heart. But today I see who you really are, and I know now that you were never mine to keep. You were always his. She looked at me. I'm sorry, James. We thought we were keeping him safe, but we were protecting ourselves from the pain of your truth and the messiness of your love. We were wrong. I nodded, not with anger but with grace. You made his life better, Clara. That's all I ever wanted. She cleaned her eyes and sat down. Daniel then stood up. The music stopped. Everyone looked at him. He didn't look at his notes. He didn't have to. I was told my parents died when I was too young to remember, he said, his voice steady and strong. And for most of my life, I thought that. I carried that story like a quiet ache. Like a song I could almost hear but couldn't quite place. He stared at me. That song found its voice today. The garden went quiet. Daniel went on. My father didn't die. He went away, not because he didn't love me, but because he loved me too much to let me know the truth. He stepped out of it and gave me a future. And for 25 years, he loved me in secret, without credit, recognition, or hope of return. He stopped for a moment and his voice broke a little. That kind of love, it doesn't come from duty. It comes from giving up something, and today, I honor that sacrifice not by forgetting the life I was given, but by accepting the truth that made me. He lifted his glass. To my dad, the man who taught me that love isn't about being seen. Even though I didn't know his name at the time, it's about being there. Even when no one is looking. Everyone stood up at the same time. The glasses clinked. Tears fell. I raised my glass back, even though I was old, tired, and shaking. Later, when the sun went down and the first stars came out, Daniel's wife came up to me. She reached out her arm. Papa, can I have this dance? I blinked in shock. But it's the dance at your wedding, she gently corrected him. It's our wedding, and your family. So I held her hand. We walked onto the dance floor, which was empty under the stars. The way you look tonight was a slow, sweet waltz that the orchestra played. She laid her head on my shoulder gently, like Daniel used to do when he was little and tired. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For loving him enough to let him go, and strong enough to come back. I didn't say anything. I held her close and swayed back and forth as the music wrapped around us like a promise. Daniel was there when the song ended. He didn't say anything. He just spread his arms, and I walked right into them. No words, no big announcements. Two hearts finally beating in the same room. In the same rhythm, and in the same truth. As the night went on and laughter filled the air, I sat at the edge of the party and watched my son dance with his wife. There was love all around me. I didn't need to be in the spotlight. I didn't need to give a speech. I just had to be here. Looked at, known, thought of, and as I looked up at the stars, which were so bright and so many, I whispered the words I had kept in my heart for 25 years. You did it. Son, you feel good, people care about you, and I'm back home.